Module 4, Health, Safety and Documentation. This section will cover surveys, health and safety folders, accident records, risk assessments, COSH assessments, and client responsibilities. So health and safety documentation. The reasons for keeping documentation are so you can record activity, what's happened, share this information with others, like your company or customers, communicate important information, keep sequential information, so keep it in a logical order, and demonstrate due diligence. So you keep documentation to record any activity, to share with others, so, oh, this has happened, a rat's done this, I better let everyone know. Communicate important information, this is really important. I better keep this in a logical order, so keep sequential information, and it demonstrates due diligence, protects you. And it's important to remember every individual is responsible for keeping themselves and others safe in the workplace. It's everyone's responsibility. Surveys. Conduct a survey by walking the site. So you conduct a survey by walking the site. And the benefits are, it helps determine the species on the site, what type of visit is necessary to give a satisfactory outcome to the customer, the number of visits you might need, the type of pest control activity required on site, any recommendations for the client to carry out, for example, proofing things, cleaning up, getting rid of stuff, hygiene, what equipment or chemicals you might need, the kind of contract required, the price, and the areas of infestation. So are they in the barn, the loft, the field, etc. So walking the site, conducting the survey helps to determine the species that are on site. So let me have a look what the infestation is. The type of visit that's necessary. So is it going to be a long visit, a short visit? The number of visits you're going to need. Is it a massive problem that I'm going to keep doing a 3-series treatment or just a one-off? The type of pest controller required. So is it a case of you need someone with a bird, someone with a gun, or someone with poison? The survey will again help you to give some recommendations to the client. So can they proof things or tidy up or clean things? What equipment or chemicals you might need, so you don't have to bring everything along, just the specified things you'll need. The type of contract you require, is it a house or is it a massive corporation? The rough price of the job, and the areas the infestation are in. So inside, outside, barn, shed, where is it? Loft. The survey also helps you to identify any hazards. So hazards, are there a lot of people around the site? Are there any non-target species? Are there a chance of contaminating anything? Like, do you need to treat something near a drain or a river? Anything that could damage the environment. When you conduct a survey, you need to do the following. So make sure you've got PPE, so gloves, high-vis jacket, etc. Check all the areas to see what areas are clear and what areas are infested. So check everywhere. You need to identify the pest species. So what is the infestation? Identify non-target species. Identify health and safety concerns. So if I put poison here, is there a chance it's going to get picked up by something else, or traps down? Is that going to cause an issue? Identify the right kind of treatment you're going to need. Identify recommendations for the customer. What can they do to help? Discuss the findings with the customer, so let them know what you found. Write it all up into notes. You need to do a risk assessment. Leave monitors or carry out appropriate treatment. So do you put those special cameras in, or can you just put some bait boxes or some kind of poison down now? Leave a treatment report, so leave a report of what they've done and make sure everything is safe. So when you're conducting the survey, you need to check every area to see where and where isn't infested. Identify the type of infestation, so what is the species. Identify the non-target species. Identify any health and safety concerns, so they have kids or children. Identify the type of treatment you need to carry out. Identify recommendations that the customer could do, keep things clean and tidy or proofing things. Discuss findings with the customer, so letting them know what's happened. Write up notes. Do a risk assessment. Leave some monitors or carry out appropriate treatments. Leave a treatment report if you do treat anything, and everything's safe. So on the survey, you need to collect details of the infestation, produce a risk assessment and site plan, and then review if the controls are working, and find out if any previous recommendations have been carried out. Recording and communicating information. So the legislation that concerns recording of information in the interest of pest management are the Management of Health and Safety Work Act, Regs 1999, risk assessment as part of the Managing Health and Safety at Work Regs, COSH, risk assessment, Working at Height Regs 2005. Treatment reports. A treatment report is given at the end of the visit when you've carried out your work, and then you give a copy to the customer. So you finish treatment, you go out to your van at the gate, you write down on a pink piece of paper what you've done on carbon paper, and then you go and give it to the customer. The purpose of a treatment report is it records all activity that you've done, so it lets them know everything that you've done. Tells them the pesticides that's been used. It keeps the customer informed as to what's taken place. Advises the customer of when the next visit will be. Advises the customer of any action they need to take. It documents date of the next visit, and it shows due diligence. So the pest controller will need a copy, and there should be a copy left on site. So the treatment report is, so you record everything, so you get back to your van, you record the activity for the treatment report, you let them know what pesticides you've used, so they can stay informed as to what you've done. Advises the customer when you're next coming, lets the customer know what you've done and what action they need to take, documents date of next visit, and it shows due diligence. And a copy of this should be left with you and the customer. So the treatment report shows the full job details, and can be used to record the basic risk assessment, COSH records, the work that's been carried out, and the invoice. So the treatment report can be one piece of paper for the risk assessment, basic risk assessment, the COSH records, work you've carried out, and it can be the invoice. The details that should be on this treatment report should be your contact details, all of the company, The customer's details, so name, address, time and date, job number. The evidence found on site in that visit. This is important because you shouldn't put any treatment down until you find evidence of a pest and recognise which pest it is. So that's under the KOSH Act. So you can't put any treatments down unless you've found and recognised the pest. It should have what actions and activity, so it will record treatments carried out. On it, you can draw up a plan of this site and mark where the traps and baits are for that visit. Record details of bait taken and carcasses found. Also, you'd have recommendations on there, so including cleaning, hygiene, proofing things. If you educate the customer, the visit will be more successful. So the treatment report should have contact details of you, the customer's details, the evidence that you found on site, because under the KOSH Act, you can't treat with chemicals unless you found evidence. The actions and activity, so record the treatment you've carried out. Draw up a map. To do this, you can draw up a map of the site and mark off where you've put pesticides or traps down. Any bait that's been taken or carcasses, and any recommendations for the customer to educate them. Application of pesticides. So you need to record active ingredients in your pesticide. So you're using a pesticide, record the active ingredient, the trade names, the quantity, how much you've used. So this will help in case of an emergency, and make sure the customer signs it and gets a copy. So when you put treatment down, you need to record of the treatment the active ingredient, the trade name. So I'm putting down bleach, the trade name, Dettol. I put down a capful. So just in case anything happens to me or the customer, it's available in case of an emergency and people will know. Make sure you and the customer have a copy. Because if you don't write it down, if anything goes wrong and you go to court, they'll say it hasn't happened. You have to write things down. Site folders. Site folders contain all the useful information on health and safety and pest control on site. They should be left on site so the customer or auditors can gain access to them. So site folders should be readily available and have useful information on the health and safety on the pest control site. In the site folders, it should have health and safety information, the risk assessment and KOSH report, details demonstrating compliance of the organisation/pest controller, and reports. And that's meant to be competence. So in a site folder, it should have health and safety information, risk assessment and KOSH report, details demonstrating competence of the organisation or pest controller, and reports. Health and safety folders. To be deemed suitable and sufficient. The folders need to contain health and safety information, emergency information, contractual and legal information, general site information, residential hazards, and asbestos. So for the health and safety folders to be suitable and sufficient, they need to have emergency information, health and safety information, contract and legal information, general site information, residential hazards, and asbestos. So you open a red folder, the health and safety folder, and there's a big green cross for health and safety. The next is a red cross because it's emergency information, and it says underneath this red cross, emergency info. The next page is a picture of a hammer on a goblet or goblet, whatever they use in a courtroom. So you know that is contractual and legal information. The next one is just getting into the mulch, the general site information, and it just says general. Residential hazards and asbestos. Accident reports. So accident reports are put into 4 categories. So an accident is an event that results in the injury or ill health. An accident is an event that results in injury or ill health. 2, an incident or near miss is an event not causing harm but has the potential to cause injury or ill health. So a near miss equals a dangerous occurrence. So number 2, an incident or near miss being a dangerous occurrence. So in this case, no harm has been caused but has potential to cause injury or ill health. 3, undesired circumstances. A set of conditions or circumstances that have potential to cause injury or ill health. For example, an untrained nurse lifting a heavy patient. It could cause problems. So that's an undesired circumstance. So a set of conditions or circumstances that have the potential to cause injury. For example, a nurse picking up a fat person, trying to help them into the bed, is an undesired circumstance because it could possibly cause harm. Sister, nurse, that's undesirable, an undesirable circumstance. 4, dangerous occurrence. So dangerous occurrence is one of a number of specific reportable adverse events defined in the reporting of injuries, disease, and dangerous occurrences regulations. So RIDDOR, riddle, is the reporting R of injuries I, disease D, and dangerous D, occurrences O, regulations R. Reporting of injuries, disease, and dangerous occurrences regulations, 2013. So the 4 categories are an accident, an event that results in injury or ill health. An incident or near miss is an event that doesn't cause harm but has the potential to cause injury or ill health. Undesired circumstances, nurse, that's undesirable of you, has the potential to cause injury or ill health. Dangerous occurrence, reporting of injuries, disease, and dangerous occurrences regulations. Accident records. So when an accident happens, we must deal with the incident immediately to ensure that everyone's safe. So someone's fallen over, you deal with it now. Protect ourselves and the public. Administer first aid if you're able to. If not, find someone else. Find another first aider. Make the area safe. Write the accident report. So, accident records. When there's an accident, we have to first of all deal with the accident immediately to ensure that everyone's safe. So someone's fallen over, and hit the head, you go to them immediately. You protect yourselves and the public. So is something falling, so you look up and you tell everyone to get away because there's stuff falling on their heads. Administer first aid or get someone else to do so. Make the area safe and write the accident report. Accidents need to be reported because an organisation can note any patterns and make changes to ensure such accidents are prevented. It's the law, and it might highlight hazards previously unknown. So they need to be reported because an organisation can notice the patterns and make changes to ensure that it's prevented. It's the law, and it highlights any hazards and it may highlight hazards previously unknown. So this is the third time that that's happened. I wonder why. We've noticed a pattern. We need to write it down, not only because it's the law, but because we hadn't noticed before, but now it's highlighted previously unknown hazards. Other records. So you need to record stocks of pesticides, tools and equipment in the pesticide vehicle. The records show goods in, goods out, and those that are currently in stock. Duration. So records should be kept of all disposals for the last 6 years. So everything gone in the last 6 years we need to get rid of. So record, what year was it? It's 2020. So we need to make sure we've got all the records from our disposals up until 2014. Equipment, need to stock checks and maintenance and calibration records. PPE records to show who has received what. Keep training records and emergency health records for 40 years. So organisation, so keeping your records in a logical order of treatment and activity makes it easier and means your company with legislation, I don't know. So risk assessments. So the Management of Health and Safety at Work Regulations 1990, MHSWA. Management of Health and Safety at Work Regulations say that if there's more than 5 employees in a company, you have to have a risk assessment on all significant risks to employees. The risk assessment has to include information as to how they're going to control the risks. If there's less than employees, it's just best practices to do it anyway, although you're not legally obligated to do so. The assessment should also take non-employees into account, like customers or members of the public. So risk assessment of the Management of Health and Safety at Work regs 1990 say that if you have more than 5 employees, you have to have risk assessments to assess any risk to employees. In the assessment, it has to include the measures you've taken to control the risk. And if you do have less than employees, it's just best practices to do this anyway. Also, it should include non-employees. It should take non-employees into account, like members of the public or customers. A hazard. So just a list of hazard and a risk. So a hazard is something that has the potential to cause harm, and the risk is how likely the hazard is to cause harm. So there's a hammer hanging off the balcony up there. That's the hazard. The risk is that is quite likely to fall off. At the start of a new contract, a specific risk assessment has to be done. This makes sure that all the hazards and risks are accounted for and recorded as much as possible or practicable. What must be included in the risk assessment? Important one, I suppose. Any hazards that you've found, controls that are in place of the hazards, inform of further measures that may be required, and any individuals that are especially at risk. So in a risk assessment on a first site visit, you should note any hazards, the controls that are in place for those hazards, information and further measures that may be required. So there's a hazard of, it could be a dog, but the bait station is in a box. Further requirement, we're going to put a fence around the box. And they've also got a retard as a child, so there is an individuals that are especially at risk. Generic risk assessment. So generic risk assessment is for if there's just your usual work that you carry out day to day, that can be covered by a generic risk assessment. For example, if you always use ladders or insecticides or rodicides, do a generic risk assessment. Employees need to be aware of all generic risk assessments so they can be followed. So generic risk assessment, I'm using a ladder again. Generic risk assessment, I'm looking at it to make sure it's safe, the area is safe. Yes, that's fine. I've followed the generic risk assessment, but the employees are legally responsible for recording any significant findings. So I'm doing a generic risk assessment for my boss. Oh, this ladder's runs quite loose. I'll report it to the employer, and the employer needs to record this finding. So, hazards. So, the findings that should be recorded include hazards and how likely they are to cause harm, who are at risk and what the harm could be, the controls that are in place, information on the future control measures that may be required, individuals that have been identified as being more at risk, so kids or retards. So in recording, in risk assessments, it should have the hazard and how likely they are to cause harm. So there's a hammer that is sitting on the edge of the rail that's quite likely to cause harm. Who is at risk? And what could the harm be? Well, anyone walking under the ladder can cause risk, and the harm would probably be knocked unconscious. So who's at risk and how, and what the harm could be. So it's going to fall on their head. The controls that are in place, where we're going to put a net up and then move the hammer. Information on future control measures, we're going to put up signs and make sure there's no hammers allowed on the edge. So those signs so information on future control measures that may be required, and individuals that have been identified as being more at risk. Well, those retards who stare up at hammers are more at risk. So the point of a risk assessment is to identify a hazard, decide the level of risk, and try to eliminate or reduce the risk as much as possible.